Today, let's talk about OpenViBE. Interfacing with the brain. OpenViBE is a software platform that enables you to design, test, and use brain-computer interfaces. Brain-computer interfaces enable you to send commands using brain activity. It is especially interesting when used in conjunction with virtual reality environments. OpenViBE originally stood for Open Virtual Brain Environment. However, they just use it as a noun at this point. And here's an introduction.
To facilitate the integration of brain-computer interfaces and the handling of commands by thought in virtual reality environments, we have created OpenViBE software. A brain-computer interface, or BCI, is a new means of communication that controls or monitors computers and machines directly using brain activity. The brain activity is measured by electroencephalography, or EEG, using electrodes located on the surface of the skull. The BCI analyzes brain signals in real time and can identify specific mental activities for use in operating a machine or computer. To use a BCI under ideal conditions and allow a user to carry out
Now they go on to talk about different applications of the use, just foot movement, imagining foot movement, hand movement. Here's a link to look at the full video. Also, just to talk about the original inventor, Hans Berger. Originally, he was more interested in brain blood flow and representing the emotional state of the individual. However, we found that later there was actual electrical broadcasts happening and started to study that as well. That's where the electrical the EEG system comes from. Here's a couple links to the wiki page as well as a blog post that talks a lot about it. What's really interesting about this sort of technology is at first it was so innovative or so breakthrough that a lot of people thought of this sort of technology as being not real science, parapsychology, psychic phenomena, and that sort of thing. But now, within the last 5-10 years, we've come to find that it is really useful, especially from the neuroscience community. We found certain applications where studying this information has become useful. Now, how does this affect my industry? Well, I think that eventually we'd like to see that in the computer industry, interfacing with the computer system, just much like the Matrix, we'll see a lot of advantages of being able to do things much faster, and also understanding the brain in general will help us to improve our computer systems as they exist today. Things like supercomputers, we're starting to see that we're having trouble getting our technology to become any smaller, so really we just need to make it more complex, and one way is through studying the brain and that kind of system that we may be able to improve our computer systems in a similar manner as well. And generally, how does this affect my business and career? Well, I may find that I will soon be interfaced with my computer in this same way. Imagine the ability to take what I, literally dream up and creating a software program from that. I know there may be some challenges, of course, in documentation and helping others understand, what I've created, that sort of thing. But, those are challenges that we definitely are going to be facing moving forward. Now, as far as adoption is concerned, we've really come to understand that the computer is, a wired system, a very complex wired system, but very much like what our computer systems do today. And so, the adoption is becoming more broadly accepted, and as far as the technology is concerned. Just to kind of go over, a sort of perspective here. from the Science Discovery Channel Network.
We call it a brain-computer interface. We use EEG to measure the faint signals generated by the brain when a person thinks. Our goal is to analyze the EEG signals to determine what it is the person is thinking. We can then send the phrases to some other person using any number of means, including email or text messaging.
Mike is testing whether this man can use the brain waves generated when he imagines two different syllables as a form of telepathic Morse code.
So it's interesting to think about that we're starting to get into this concept of understanding phrases more than just simple movement of the body, but also now into specifically thought patterns. So this technology is advancing, and one thing to think about is how does this really affect our society. So let's take a look at a TED Talk that discusses this more in detail.
Help make you more attentive, focused, relaxed, for example. It could be used to help diagnose and treat a number of health issues. Also consider what you could do by correlating data from scanning your brain with something like a wearable camera or an eye tracking device. You're going about your day and you look at a certain object or another person, it elicits a reaction in you. And you now have a record of what you were looking at and when, along with some data about what your brain was doing. In your own hands, this could be used to discover feelings you weren't even aware of, to help you understand what makes you happy or miserable in life. In the hands of someone with your best interest at heart, it could be used to help you in all sorts of ways. But what about the hands of an advertising agency trying to sell you stuff you don't need? What about the hands of an Orwellian government trying to monitor thought crime? So there's this other side of it that we have to consider, and it's kind of scary. But this is not a new story. Every time in human history that a new tool comes along, it brings with it a certain amount of potential for good and a certain amount of potential for harm. How it ultimately works out is up to us. One option we have, and I do encounter this regularly, is to say, this technology is just too risky, too potentially destructive. Can't allow it to exist. Well, you're welcome to try and fight that fight, but I can pretty much guarantee that you'll lose. And while you're distracted, the technology will go ahead and become ubiquitous anyway, without any input from you. Another option is that we can let profit motives guide the integration of this technology into our lives, which is inevitably going to happen. But I think we have an obligation to at least help shape that process. The difference between brain-computer interfaces being a positive, life-changing technology and being used to manipulate you comes down to who has access to the data. So what can we do? If you're a person who makes things, keep making awesome things. We need that. Keep pushing the boundaries. But make things that promote and respect personal ownership, personal data. If you're a person who uses things, while you're out using these amazing life-changing devices, be aware of what data is being created about you, who owns it. We need you to promote the cultural values of data ownership, privacy, autonomy. Embrace the technology, respect it, let it help make you a better human. Just don't let it matter.
So it brings up an interesting point that we want to make sure that we are aware of what the implications are of this kind of technology. As far as monetary concerns, or like he was talking about, that the real sort of advantage or things that we can ways that we can earn money with this technology is obviously through hardware design. The headsets themselves, the interface technology between the headset and the computer system. Here's another headset example, another interface sort of system where you get to isolate a particular portion of the skull or side of the skull that is being monitored. Also, the systems involved, the computer software systems that are involved in order to manipulate, and translate that into actions that a machine can take. Here's another example of a piece of hardware that is used to isolate particular areas. And again, software sensing technology, so that we can understand those brain waves more intricately. Also, some mapping technology here, and another example of the frequency magnitude of maybe even just isolating a couple different senses or frequencies that we're examining here, and kind of what the shape of the magnitude of the more detailed view of each signal. And then, here we even have design, of course. This kind of looks like something Apple would come up with. That we would see that, this could become fashionable to a certain extent. Here's another system that's kind of put together, showing you all that's involved. The computer system, the interface hardware. This is more of a sort of a lab environment setup that we have today. And here's an application. I think that we right away are focused on how can this help people now. And, obviously with people that are suffering from some sort of disability, it definitely can help them with mobility. I think the most interesting part here is that it's only a piece of the technology. There's all sorts of other things like robotics that are going to benefit from this. So, I think integrations between technologies is really where we're going to see this shine. Now, here's a sci-fi sort of representation of what could happen here in the future. Kind of skip ahead here. You can watch the whole video, a link to it here. But basically it goes through and shows how he can control this bug, that's this mechanical bug. And, as you can see here, that he still has a heads-up display. Now the subject of this video is this particular individual who has become so advanced with this technology that he can also, presumably with just his mind power, is able to, you'll see here that he can deflect the bullet and go as so far as to destroy his opponent. And then which is pretty gruesome here, but you can see how this sort of idea that we're enhancing our human nature to an extent where we're able to do things that we weren't able to do before. Telekinesis, those sorts of ideas kind of come back here again. And here they'll be plunging away in a portal. You can watch the whole video here. I'll link to it as well. We didn't want that to happen. There we go. Now, as far as factors of success, of course we can measure things like improving mobility, productivity, increasing knowledge not only in ourselves but also with knowledge about how the human body brain works. But we also want to make sure that we're taking into concern those privacy concerns. So this is where OpenViBE really helps us, because not only it does, being open source, it makes it more available for more individuals to collaborate on this, but just in general, that this technology is in the right place in the right time. That we are seeing a sweet spot of acceptance, as well as the skill sets involved, and there is a lot of profitability in this area as well, especially with hardware and software systems. So I'd like to see in the next 5 to 10 years that we're going to start replacing our mouse and keyboard with a headset instead. It would be very interesting. Thank you, and have a good day.